Hello and welcome to episode 97 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. As always, I am joined by fellow co-founder Evan Silva. And one other request we have heard most often is we need more auction content. Auction is the real way to play, they say. Snake drafts are for boomers, they say. So we went out. We got the best, one of the game's most renowned and experienced auction players out there. It is notorious high-stakes auction grinder, Jack Haan. Jack, how's it going?
It's going well, Adam. Thanks for having me. And Evan.
Thanks for being here. Evan, I know you've heard it as well. We've covered a lot of snake stuff. We have not covered a lot of auction stuff. What's going on?
What's up? I had to, I listened to Jack Haan on a podcast. I think it was the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, maybe like 2016 or something. And, he obviously was, really smart and had a bunch of insights regarding auction. So over the past year, I've had to recruit Jack Haan because Jack Haan is not a guy that really wants to give away a lot of information. I had to go, put on my Bob Huggins hat, my Rick Pitino hat and buy him beers and take him out for pizza. And I finally lured him onto the Establish the Run podcast. He did an excellent article regarding his personal auction draft strategy. And I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah. So to sum it up, basically it just took some beers and pizza and I was in.
Exactly.
Cheap date. Okay. I want to be sure everyone reads Jack's article on Establish the Run right now because, as Evan said, Jack reveals in detail exactly how he preps for an auction draft. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about preparation here, Jack, because that's obviously a huge key to it. I'll put the link to Jack's article in the show notes. We're also going to talk about some of those concepts that he talks about in the article today, because I think there's a ton of strategy and nuance around auction. And maybe we'll even talk about some players a little bit as well. But first, I wanted to get to know Jack a little bit. How did you get into this whole high stakes auction fantasy football thing, Jack? You seem like a normal guy, not one of these basement dwellers like the rest of us who are into here grinding fantasy football.
I think you got to go back 20 years. I had a partner back then, and we went to the very first World Championship of Fantasy Football when it started. So I've been going to Vegas for 20 years. Since the inception of the national competitions, and probably at about year 7 or 8. So I've been in it for 12 or 13 years. I started to watch some of the auctions and I just said, whoa, this is for me. It was great. It was just exciting to watch. And I just jumped in the next year then.
Yeah. There's no denying that auction is more exciting. You can't prepare quite in the same kind of linear way that you prepare for a snake draft. Why do you think auction caught your eye? Why do you think auction is better than snake?
I've always been a gamer, right? A strategy gamer. My family knows that. I'm super competitive, always have been for 53 years. So when I saw auction drafts, there's so much more strategy involved. Redrafts, I get to sit back, check players off a list, think about who I'd like to take in a few picks. Auction, it's every single second. Someone gets nominated. Right away, I'll know how much they ought to go for. Am I going to bid? How much am I going to bid? It's constant microseconds decisions along the way. How am I going to change things? Because there's always things that need to change. So it's basically, to me, 2.5 to 3 hours of straight fun and excitement. And I just love to do those so much more than redrafts, although redrafts are fine too.
Yeah. You're speaking my language with this gamer stuff. Do you play any DFS? Do you play any poker? It sounds like that stuff might be right up your alley too.
I don't. I've dabbled a little bit in DFS, but I just pretty much concentrate on the yearly redraft leagues. More and more toward auctions, but still do national competitions. Poker, I've always respected those who know it really well and decided I'm best not to play that because I'd probably like it and then just lose a lot. So I leave that to you guys.
Okay, cool. All right, let's get into some auction stuff. Obviously, we have spent a ton of time, Evan and I, and Evan in particular, comparing relative player values, what we think of X guy versus Y guy, what we think X team is going to do, coaching strategy, everything that goes into what a player's value is. How do you talk a lot in the article about preparing yourself by coming up with values that you think a player is worth. I think it's kind of easier said than done. How do you recommend people come up with their own values going into a draft?
Well, I explained in the article, the way that has worked for me for years now is getting actual numbers. You have to go out there and find the information that will tell you what the actual numbers will be, or, a close range for what the actual sale prices of players are. It's nice that sites put together expected value, and sometimes they try to guess how much they might go, but it's nothing like actually knowing, because when you know the numbers, then you can really game plan for what is going to work for a particular plan. There's always here or there might be some variations with players, but it's a limited amount of money. It's $2,400 on a $200 cap and 12 team league.
Mm-hmm.
So if money's going one way, it has to be accounted for somewhere else.
Sure. Evan, have you played a lot of auction? My home league actually went to auction like 4 years ago. And so I have a bit of experience playing auction. These are all online, not live, which I think is a different setting. But do you play much auction at all, Evan?
I really haven't. I mean, I've played auctions before, but never for, a significant amount of money, like expert mock auctions, and I want to get more into it, and I want to join this league that Jack, accused me of chickening out on. But I wanted to ask Jack one specific question, because one thing, I mean, this idea of the game plan where you almost you're almost like pre-dedicating numbers to guys and building like a team in advance that you can actually build during the auction. I mean, you have to read the article. That's probably not the best description of it, but Jack like pre-plans a team. You almost like plan to draft a specific roster type. Obviously, you're not probably going to be able to put together that exact same team, but that concept of almost like putting together the team in advance was really, really interesting to me when I was reading your article, and I was hoping that you could elaborate on that. Like, how helpful is that to actually put into action?
Percentage-wise, I can usually hit about 60 or 70% of the players. If I have a list of 8 guys in my plan, I could usually get at least 5 or 6 of those right. You have to go with the flow, though. If someone's going to bid $5 more on the guy you planned, you have to drop it and move on. So it all depends how it's going. The other night I had an auction on Saturday night where I budgeted Alvin Kamara for 49. Well, I ended up buying him for 53, but that was okay. It was almost as a high end of the range, but I did it. And then I just have to adjust the rest of the plan, moving numbers around a little bit. So I always, though, put in backup players. So if I wouldn't have gotten Kamara, who else is comparable to $49 in my mind? The Zeke Elliott, is that someone I'd even be interested in? Dalvin Cook, a few dollars lower. How about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? That's, maybe about $5 to $7 lower these days. So are those guys I'd be willing to take for that slot? And if it is, and then I buy one for 44, I've saved myself, $6, $7, and then I can move it to another position and I know it right away. So always have to have backup plans there too. So if I'm hitting guys in my first, second, or third slots, then I feel like I've accomplished what I've set out to do.
And when you put together those like pre-planned, almost like, let's call them like roster builds, a pre-planned roster build, how many teams might you put together during your planning process? I mean, would it be 10? Would it be maybe 3? Or how do you do that?
It could be any of those. It could be 3 or 4. When I fly out to Vegas, I'm doing it for 4 hours on the plane. It's like literally my favorite flight of the year, because I start putting together like at least 8 to 10 different plans for leagues that I'm doing. And some of them might be all just in, for example, an FFPC league, because I do several of those with those rules. So I'll do quite a few, and I'll try all different types of strategies, whether it's heavy wide receiver, whether it's stud running back, heavy tight end. a combination of all of those. And then every once in a while, I'll hit one and I'll go, oh, yeah, that's good. Right. And so I know, yeah, that's good. The numbers and the numbers work. And I know if I go really heavy on studs, I know that I have lesser players for $5 or $7 or $10 ready to go in the other slots that I'm happy with.
Yeah. What
So
you're,
let me get in one more.
go ahead.
So you have to be also able to, you have to be very, like you have to have an ability to adjust on the fly, right? Yeah, because, you're talking about, hey, I go in with this plan, but I'm also willing to have a backup plan on certain, salary allocations. That like probably goes hand in hand with what you do in real life, being a litigator, right? I mean, sometimes a curveball might come at you and you have to be able to adjust to that.
Yeah, all the time. And it's probably not a coincidence that I'm a lawyer doing that and loving auction drafts. It's the same kind of quick thought process, second to second, same kind of thing.
Okay, I want to get into some roster building here because what you're describing, like building teams and stuff, is exactly what we do in DFS. We try stuff around. If we have some really good cheap plays that we like, we can afford more expensive plays. We might overpay for a guy that we really like more, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about starters versus bench because a lot of people's question is, hey, how much should I be spending on my starters versus my bench? We're assuming 8 starters. Jack's referring to leagues in the article: quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, tight end. People want to say, hey, should I just fill my bench with all $1 guys? Just load up on all starters? What's your strategy on starters versus bench?
When I do my plans, I will always try to start with a budget of 170 to 175 of the 200. So it's anywhere from 85 to 90%. I try not to go up to 90, but 85 to 87% on my starters. And then I can adjust it here. If I'm at 170, I can always adjust it a couple if I paid $3 more for a player that I really want. So if I know I have those numbers, then it's easy enough for me to adjust along the way.
A strategy, I think a common strategy, and the strategy I like to employ in auction, and I think, and it's obvious, stars and scrubs is what you're going to hear from a lot of people, right? And we talk about that's often right in DFS also when you have really good $1 players, $2 players in DFS, really good 3K players, 3,500. I probably overrate my ability, and my opponents certainly in my auction with my home league aren't the same as your opponents, but I overrate my ability to get $1 and $2 players that could be starters for me that I think are actually good. So if you can, I think stars and scrubs is right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what it's like against more tougher competition, but where do you come down on this whole debate of balance for stars and scrubs?
That's a good question. So based on my years of observing and playing and learning from the best guys, I am stars and scrubs. All right. So that's what I developed. And then as I watched the guys that I respect the most, and that means who win the most, right? It's almost always guys that go stars and scrubs, almost always. So, I could name 4 or 5 players. I'm like, yeah, those are the top guys I compete against. Almost invariably, they do the same thing. It doesn't mean other strategies don't work. I've just seen results. And so that's what I do. And that's what I'm going to do and stick with that.
Yeah. If everybody's trying to do that, though, we're going to run into a problem, right? Because then the bidding for the foundation players gets out of control, particularly in this year, I think, where the top, 12 running backs is so far a cut ahead of the rest. Isn't everybody going to be trying to do this? And the bidding on those top 12 running backs is going to get out of control?
Yeah, it definitely can. Then you have to make the decision. And I try to do that ahead of time. If that's going to happen, then I should have a backup plan. What would I do in that circumstance? So based on my league, where will the value, this specific league I'm doing, where will the value probably fall? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm seeing this year with such a huge overemphasis on about the top 8 to 10 running backs and paying big numbers for those. Am I going to jump in and bite it and buy 1 or 2? Or am I going to look at some of the values that I'm seeing at other positions? So I've pretty much so far gone one way, and I'll get at least one of the top running backs. But I'm prepared in the event people are pricing me out, to be ready for a different plan because I have them ready to roll.
Yeah.
Last year, I know that Lamar Jackson was one of your highest owned quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
But he was pretty cheap. I mean, you were probably getting him for, I don't know, what, $9 to $12, maybe
No,
15?
3. In Vegas, I was getting it for 3. Right.
$3. Okay.
Yeah.
So, obviously in season-long redraft, the dominant strategy when it's approaching the quarterback position is late round quarterback, spend as little as you possibly can on the quarterback position. How do you deal with that though in auction? Would you be willing to pay, I don't know, $30-$40 for Patrick Mahomes or $30-$40 for Lamar Jackson?
Never. I can tell you the prices this year based on $200 leagues, 12-team leagues, and this is both for FFPC type rules with tight end premium or just straight PPR leagues. The prices for Jackson is about 20 to 24, and same thing for Mahomes. So if it's going to be at around 15, I might do it, but somebody's always willing to pay up for those quarterbacks. Is there an advantage? Yes. But is there enough of an advantage when you know how deep this player pool is for quarterbacks and the guys that I'm getting for $2 or $3? And I haven't done it yet, buying either Mahomes or Lamar. It's to me that I want to take that money and put it in position players instead.
Right.
What's your strategy for like nominating specific players? Do you try to nominate guys that you do want? Do you try to nominate guys that you don't want? How do you go about that?
This is literally at least a full podcast because how you nominate and when and who, there's so many different variables that go into that. Okay. One of the things I would say though, from the beginning is I don't nominate anyone just to take money off the board. I know some people do that. Well, let's nominate the highest player remaining, highest cost player, just to take money off the board. I don't think that's a good purpose because other guys are going to do that. I always have a purpose for a nomination. So, and it could be just small purposes. Like I've noticed if 6 quarterbacks are off the board, but there's still guys like Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson available. All right, then I'm going to nominate Tom Brady, and someone's going to put Tom Brady on their team. Okay, and I'm going to nominate another $3 quarterback. Would just increase my odds to get Kyler Murray, because I saw that happen in an auction last week. Kyler Murray went for $6, and I said, oh my goodness, right? Is there something to be learned there for some of these guys to put up other guys and have them bought? So, you just never know how that's going to go, but that's a purpose. Saturday night, I was in an auction and I created a plan, one of those where I went, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I bought 3 stud running backs from the first round in like the first 12 buys: Kamara, Cook, and Hilaire. Okay, I got the juices flowing, right? But then what's my nomination strategy after that? Now that's one where I'm going to nominate running backs after that because I expect their prices to go higher. Because now I have 3 of them on my team, and there's 11 teams that say we need running backs. So prices did go up. $4 on Mixon, $4 on Derrick Henry, $4 more on other one. And so I purposely wanted to take that money off the board with a purpose of running backs. So that's one big thing. Always looking for a purpose.
Yeah.
One other thing that I've noticed and I've learned in all my years, that if there's a player, let's say some kind of veteran, you're not hearing much buzz about. And as I was thinking about this, Cortland Sutton is a perfect example this year, even though he's a 2nd or 3rd year player, right? I know his price. There's no buzz about him. If I nominate a guy like that with my first nomination, he is not going to go for $24. It is going to go for 18. So if he's an important guy in my plan, I'm not nominating him first guy, because then I know I can literally buy him, put him in the plan, and boom, I have him. That doesn't work for a guy like Terry McLaurin, though. A lot of buzz. Everyone's getting on him, right? So if you put him up early, he'll go for $4 or $5 extra for sure. So there's different things like that just help me know when to nominate certain players. There's also an art to nominations, like at the end. If I have a certain guy that I kind of like, and like for example, one is Sterling Shepard, because I know typically if he comes toward the end of the auction, $2 or $3. But if I put him up somewhere in the middle, someone will buy him for $6. So you can't do it. Right. So those things you learn over time, when to put up players and when not to. But literally there's so many points on this, Evan. I could talk about nominations for a long time.
Well, I think we probably would agree that the sucker in every auction is the guy who, like, you know, he doesn't spend like 55 of his budget, right? Or 40. Does that ever happen in like high stakes auctions where a guy just almost like outsmarts himself and doesn't spend, you know, or only spends like 160 of his 200?
Not quite that much. I've seen anywhere from $10 to $20 where guys buy too many lower price players along the way and then suddenly have $10 or $15, maybe even more at the end. So you'll see some crazy nomination for his last guy. He'll just put it all up on a final player. I'm never in that position because I've spent.
Right. Yeah. When you go stars and scrubs early, you're way more likely to be, you know, kind of squeeze out $1 and $2 guys than you are worrying about leaving money on the table. And also you had a line in there, I think your line from your wife, it said, remember the Nordstrom principle. If you want it, buy it. Now, yeah. I had to ask you about that because you didn't explain it really in the article. First of all, congrats to your wife. If you want to buy it, sounds like a great attitude to have. Second of all, we can't really say that all the time, right? Because even if I want Christian McCaffrey, I can't spend more than $10 an ounce prepared to spend on him. So we can't just want it and buy it, right?
Most of the time, yes. Right? Most of the time. You might be willing to pay the extra, but then you better have it budgeted in to know what else you can get. You're likely going to hurt your team if you decide to go that high. But, you know, that's what she's used on me when she comes back from Nordstrom. So I thought it was good advice. There's certain players you gotta say, I'm gonna get them. Yeah. As long as you know what the actual value is. Right.
I think the point that you made about buzz guys, because like I know I'll do my draft, and if I put Will Fuller up there, I'm gonna end up paying an extreme premium to get Will Fuller. If I put someone up there, like you said, Cortland Sutton, somebody else who's not getting any buzz, you know, I'll get him for cheap. So, you know, that's the difference between auction and snake, I think. You know, you can get Will Fuller consistently in the 6th round of snake. You can be confident in that. In auction, man, it could get wild if you put Will Fuller up there.
Well, that's a really interesting player to bring up because that was one of the guys I was going to bring up at the end. If you asked me about certain players, he is consistently going for $9 or $10, which is one of those guys that really makes no sense to go for $9 or $10. Don't put him up early. Wait till the end. No one puts him up early, but if you do, then he might go for 15. But he is going for a great price in light of what he's looking at this year. And I know both you guys are Will Fuller fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one strategy that I have for the end game, you mentioned end game, because I do think end game is important, especially if you're going with the stars and scrubs strategy. If I think I have a sleeper that I like, I mean, I won't nominate him until everybody's out of money. So like, I like Zach Moss or I like Damian Harris. And obviously these guys have buzz now, but I'm talking about like a few weeks ago. I would just literally try to wait till everybody is out of their money to nominate them. Hopefully everybody just forgets about these guys. And maybe I have enough at the end to outbid somebody else who might be waiting for them also. When you get to the end game, do you typically just wait and try to wait out people's money and try to get the guys you like for $1?
It's really hard to do that because there's always a few players that have those couple extra dollars that are ready to spend it, right? So if there's someone with any kind of buzz or the sharp players, you better be ready to put them up for 2 to try to avoid that. And so on my favorite endgame players, I'll try to save for those $2 nominations just to increase my probabilities that I get him on my team. Yeah. If I know a guy's going for $1, based on all the auctions I've been doing, I'll save him for $1. One guy that kind of surprises me on that is Curtis Samuel. I've never been a fan, but the dude's going to be in Joe Brady's offense. For $1, I'll wait. Yeah, well, I'm letting one of my secrets out now, right? But I'll wait till the end if I can on Curtis Samuel and put him up for $1. And I've yet to not get him for $1 because so many people have, I think, on recency bias, just haven't seen the results from Curtis Samuel.
Yeah. See, and this is why I always end up going stars and scrubs. You give me Curtis Samuel for $1. I mean, now we're talking, now we're cooking with gas. And then, so yeah, that's definitely the style that I would take. I want to ask about price enforcing. I am known in my league as the price enforcer. I don't let people get away with steals and stuff like that. And the point you made in the article is, in a worst case scenario, I end up getting a guy for cheaper than I think he would be if I bid him up to maybe $3 or $4 cheaper than I think he should go. So in a worst case scenario, I end up with the guy, but I got him at a good price. So are you the price enforcer in these leagues that you do? Is there someone that takes that role often, or you just only do it on guys that you definitely want?
I pretty much do it. I'm really active when I have the money to spend, right? And I know where that point usually comes where I need to stop. And you mentioned it, if I'm within $3 or $4 on the higher price guys, then I'll back off. And there's other guys that know the numbers pretty much as well. So I don't have to be the only one doing it. Typically in the leagues that I do that are live in Vegas, there'll be at least 3 or 4 guys that are price enforcing. Often we're going against each other when we're seeing a few dollars of value sitting there on the player, but we'll be bidding against each other. So I'll do that. I used to make some mistakes when I first started and I'd go too far. Mm-hmm. So when I know I get close, I always have to ask myself, that split second, am I willing to spend that money on this guy? Because it could easily happen. And so at that point, I'll just stop and let someone else keep bidding if they're in. But I think that is part of our job. You have to know it.
When I get into like a price enforcing war with somebody, I'll just type in the chat box. I'm doing these online. I'll type in the chat box, like, I'm going to stick you, in like all capital letters. Just let them know that I might stop bidding at any time.
Well, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
It's even more fun live, right?
For sure.
It's awesome live because then I love the psychological game too. So I'll change up my cadence. I'll change up my volume. That's the most fun when I get louder. Right. Then some guys will be like, what's that? And it's funny to me, but it's all part of the fun, just to how to mix things up and how fast you bid, how slow you bid, jumping in at the last second. So you can't be predictable on these things.
We talked a lot about the similarities between auction and DFS, which I think is really interesting. I really hadn't even considered that before. But one of the big approaches in DFS to stack your quarterback with, a pass catcher, or maybe even a running back, or maybe both. Is that something that you concern yourself with very much in auction drafts, or are you more focused on trying to get good values, trying to, build your pre-planned game plan?
I'm mostly just focused on my own plan. If I see a value along the way, that is definitely a value, and sometimes that happens. I'll buy it, put it in the plan, and adjust the plan on the fly. So that looking for the values becomes increasingly important in the last 40% of the auction of the players. Looking for, you just never know, when that Kyler Murray for $6 suddenly comes up. I'm not usually looking for it at quarterback because the prices are pretty much set. I know what they're going to be. I look for it in the other positions, but you just got to be ready to jump in as fast as you can, especially live, and especially at the end game. I should mention that with the $1 and $2 players that Adam brought up, man, you have got to be ready for that dollar nomination to go to. You got to be lightning fast. The other night I missed out on Emmanuel Sanders for 2 and Anthony Miller for 2. Because I was just a hair slow on hitting the button online.
Yeah. Got a quick trigger finger. We mentioned a little bit about running backs, and you said you did one with a strategy of getting 3 of the top 12, 3 first round running backs. I'm curious if you think this year is unique with all the running back thirst and how that affects auction versus snake, because in auction, obviously you have a completely empty palette. You can do whatever you want. You can get 3 of the top 12 if you want them. How do you think this year's kind of running back thirst affects auctions?
It has moved money from focusing on wide receivers, which had really been in vogue, like 4 or 5 years ago, moved it back to wide receiver value. So the money went from wide receivers to running backs, which has created just fantastic veteran bargains in wide receivers. I mean, I've seen some numbers. Here's one for Evan. Amari Cooper, 3 straight drafts, $21 to $22. Typically in years past, Cooper would have been at least 29. And his situation's only improved in Dallas, right? Mm-hmm. He's been way below market in my mind. Mike Evans, $25, $26 every draft. He's like the most consistent wide receiver over the past 6 years. And his price has moved down. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to create a draft plan if you want to focus on, those receivers that are like rated 10 to 12 that are really good prices that aren't getting a lot of buzz. And, there's been negative buzz about Evans and whether Brady's going to throw downfield. That's pretty much all I hear over the last 6 months, but he's still Mike Evans, right? So you can focus on getting a lot of good wide receiver values this year.
Yeah. Well, I like Mike Evans, so I don't want to get too far into player takes, but I think there shouldn't be as big of an ADP gap between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans as there is. I think Mike Evans is definitely a good buy.
Let me jump in with one player take, because Jack discussed this independently. The notion of, trying to secure like the Ravens backfield, because Mark Ingram's not going to be particularly expensive. J.K. Dobbins is not going to be particularly expensive. I don't know exactly what the auction values are, but my guess is that you can maybe get both of them for like $25 or something like that, right? Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that? That's like a strategy that is not approved in many other fantasy formats, but may make sense, a lot of sense potentially in auction.
It does make sense in auction in a solo contained league versus a national competition. If there's 2 guys, not sure who the starter is going to be, and it's really just those 2 guys, then what's the price? What's the total price? So like you said, Ingram and Dobbins, I've seen them go anywhere from a combination of $25 or even $21. They both came out late the other night, $21 on the Baltimore Ravens run offense, right? And I don't think it's going to be Edwards or Justice Hill doing much. So if one of those guys gets hurt, or if Dobbins just takes that role over at the end of the year, you've got a cheaper stud running back there. You just got to, take some risk on with that. There's some other really good ones too. I mean, I've seen Jonathan Taylor going from anywhere from $16 to $20. Pair him with Mack, which feels kind of cheap to me because I'm not sure how long he's going to hang on to anything. But that's another one that's going anywhere from $20 to $24. Right. You have Nyheim Hines in there. Not sure how many third downs he's going to be in on, but you can look for these combinations of players that could fill one of those running back slots in a game plan like that. So you could take a couple of those on some run heavy offenses and really hit some consistent point producing wide receivers in a plan by saving money on running back. So if you're not hitting those big time, RB thirsty teams, that the teams are sucking those up, that's one way you can go with it.
Yeah. I think the difference with, we don't recommend people typically taking handcuffs very often because it caps your upside a lot. And Jack mentioned in national tournaments, these large field tournaments, and in best ball, it really caps your upside a lot. But in auction, the opportunity cost isn't as much because if you're getting guys at good values, you don't spend nearly as much as your cap as you would spending like a 6th and a 7th on Dobbins and Mark Ingram or something like that.
Exactly. Exactly. I got one other really good one for you. And this one was, I thought, knowing how much Evan loves the Dallas Cowboys, and maybe you do too, Adam. I saw the ETR value on auctions for Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb was $55. They've been consistently selling all 3 of them together for $35, $37, $39. Those are my last 3 auctions. So a huge amount of value on an offense that would make Evan salivate, right? This is why you need to do an auction with us, Evan.
Yeah, we're way above market on Amari Cooper. That's probably where the big price difference comes in. But yeah, and I think Michael Gallup is a tremendous value too. And no, and people don't seem to be too excited about CeeDee Lamb for whatever reason, as well.
Yep.
Okay, before we get to listener questions, anything else for Jack, Evan?
No, let's hit the listener questions.
All right, from Blue Devil Boss, he says, how do you evaluate pricing strategy? Is it a points per dollar comparison? I guess Blue Devil Boss is asking how to evaluate players' prices. Like, is it just strictly you project their points, you divide it by their salary, and that's how you get a value? Because that's like the most remedial way you would do it in DFS.
Well, I obviously, as I've explained, I get actual price results from completed auctions in similar leagues. So then I know what the numbers are. But then I will go to websites and I'll look at projections. How are people viewing? Here's a guy, Robert Woods. You know, he's been steady, consistent, and a lot of sites are actually rating Robert Woods higher, right? So if I get a feel for how it is with projections, because I'm not going to be the stud on projections. I leave that to people who like to do that. I don't. Who like to do that and are knowledgeable on it. And then I'll compare where prices are versus where are these guys projected. So I just form my own opinions then, looking at where I know the numbers are going to come in versus how highly these guys are projected to produce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're not dealing with your own statistical projections where you're saying, well, Dak Prescott's 20. I'm only projecting him for 400 fantasy points, and Matt Ryan goes for 15, but I'm projecting him for 450 fantasy points. Price per dollar is obviously a way better value on Matt Ryan, right? You're not coming in with that kind of sheet.
No, not that detailed. No.
Yeah. Okay. We might be able to set you up with Mike Leone. You might be able to getting something done here with some more spreadsheets and stuff out there.
I had an auction with him earlier this year.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Did you crush him?
A nice job. Mm-hmm.
You probably bid way too much on DeAndre Hopkins.
Probably did put him on the team. Yeah.
Okay. Question 2 comes from the dude Abides. We kind of hit on this already, but he says, when is the best time to nominate popular sleeper / undervalued that you are targeting? And let's not talk about the $1 and $2 guys. Let's just talk about guys you like that you think are undervalued who might go in like the mid range. When do you like to nominate those kind of guys?
Well, if they're a popular sleeper, the players, there's no good time to nominate them because people are on them. So you see this every year with certain players, more and more buzz, then they're no longer a sleeper. And so they are going to go for higher than you probably expect, whether it's beginning of the auction or whether it's toward the end. So the only time I'd probably nominate a popular player like that's got a lot of buzz is if I specifically want to take him off the board so I could get a guy later on like Will Fuller.
Right.
That's when I would do it. If you really want the player, then I'd probably just try to nominate it right in the middle of the auction somewhere. If that's a popular guy with the buzz, because I don't think there's any really good time.
Is there any merit to like letting people blow their role? Like, hey, let's let you, hang yourself with all these overpaying for guys throughout the draft, and then I'm going to wait to nominate, I don't know, like Ronald Jones until, 6 teams have already blown their load.
It can happen, yeah, where then you get, if you see someone that's falling and surprised, a lot of money's off the board, it's likely that's going to be way undervalued player. And I've seen that happen a few times in the last week. At pretty much every auction, there's going to be someone like that hasn't been nominated, especially in a stars and scrubs focused league. There will be undervalued players that are going to be bid on. So if I'm in there in that situation, I always want to look at how teams are getting constructed, because if it's a Ronald Jones, I'd be saying, who else needs a running back yet? And how much money do they have? Right. And if I think it's a guy that I can get based on what I'm seeing and who needs a running back, then I might put him up and go bid it and get him.
Speaking of that, you mentioned in the article that during an auction, you keep track of what every other team is doing in terms of positions filled and their money. If you draft online, I play on Yahoo or whatever, they keep that for you. I assume you have to keep it by hand in Vegas or whatever, but there's definitely a ton of value in that. What are you looking at when you look at other guys' teams as you kind of get to the middle and the end?
I'm always looking to see who has filled positions and who have open. It works great with a one starter with a tight end or the quarterback. If someone still doesn't have a second running back, I want to know that. I want to know who I'm bidding against and how much money they have. So I always feel like that gives me an advantage to know who still needs to fill slots, because then I can see how much money they have. And yeah, it's so much easier online for those that keep track of that.
Yeah.
But it does help to see, especially in a league that starts 3 wide receivers. Then you got to see who still has money and who's going to be bidding on wides, because there's guys that they're going to be coming down the pike, like a Tyler Boyd and McLaurin, DK Metcalf, guys that are in like the $12 to $18 range. And you got to know how many there are, if you still need 2 of them, and who else needs them. So
Right.
it helps to know that, and then to figure out when you're going to put them up. If I see that happening and there's certain guys that need a position, that's where I'd nominate a guy that I don't want. A wide receiver, fill that slot. You can have him. I don't want him. Just to, marginally increase the likelihood that I get a player on my team that I do want.
Right. All right. Question 3 comes from Reagan. He says, with auction allowing you to construct any type of team you want, is there merit to the idea of building a roster of 3rd to 5th round guys? He's talking about Snake, obviously. Typically, I find these players as values as most budget is spent on the first 36. This goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. If everybody's going stars and scrubs, you're going to get incredible values, I would think, on like 3rd to 5th, 3rd to 7th round Snake draft guys. I'm a little bit surprised that you don't find this to be like maybe a profitable contrarian strategy. I understand that my first lean would be stars and scrubs also. I'm just kind of afraid that everybody I'm playing against is going stars and scrubs too. So I don't know. And I know we talked about this a little bit already, but any thoughts for Reagan?
I always look at results and what's worked for me. So like I said, there's value to it, and you can definitely win an auction league that way. But it's not the way I'm going to choose, because honestly, it's pretty rare when someone's going to push me out of stars and scrubs, because I am really aggressive during those first 8 to 10 guys that come up, because typically it's the same big priced players. But certainly, I've seen guys win that way. It's just not my preferred strategy. So for Regan's question, yeah, there's value to it. And if it was everyone doing stars and scrubs, then I might actually change and look to see, especially this year with the wide receiver values I'm seeing, that I could easily put in a plan where I'd have 4 of those guys that might be typically $27, $25 players for cheaper, and maybe get a couple of teams where we talked about Ingram Dobbins combination for later on.
Right. Okay. A lot of people have sent the same question. They want their friends, they want their league to switch from Snake to auction. They're looking to you for advice, Jack. How do you convince your friends, your buddies, to switch from Snake to auction? Give them the goods.
I'd first make sure my league is a bunch of diehards, guys that have been in the league and love fantasy football, because if this is some, work league where you've brought in guys that have, or gals that just aren't very interested, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
But if it's my league, I would say, you guys, we have to try this at least once. I've seen this recommendation before. We have to try this once. If you don't like it better, we can always go back to redraft. But it's so much more fun. There's so much more strategy. You get to buy any player you want. So everyone will have an equal chance at Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
So I would go with that argument and work on guys.
Yeah. And I actually think that's the best argument for guys that listen to this. There's a lot of DFS guys that listen to this. It's just so much more strategy than Snake. And that would be my best argument for it. And also, it's just not fair. Like, whoever runs pure and gets the 1.01 gets Christian McCaffrey. That doesn't seem American. You know what I mean? Everybody should have an equal chance to get Christian McCaffrey. All right. Anything else for Jack, Evan, before we get out of here?
No, this was excellent. Thanks so much for joining us, Jack. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jack, tell the people where they can find you if you want to be found. I don't know if you want to be found or not. If you do, feel free to plug anything or tell the people where they can find you.
On the internet, if you need a business lawyer. Jack Haan Law, that's my Twitter handle also, Jack Haan Law. And I'm there in a suit with my daughter from a few years ago. So I'm fairly easy to find on the internet or Twitter.
Cool. You can find Jack's article as part of our draft kit. Again, our draft kit is just $35. Comes with a $25 coupon to use an FFPC, and then it's only $10, and then you'll win your league after listening to Jack's advice, and then it's just a total print fest. It's like free money, found money. So go ahead and check that out. So for Evan, for Jack, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.